Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Humanity is caught in a dilemma. We are limited in the amount of understanding that we have. We are limited in the knowledge that we have. We are limited in the wisdom that we have. We are limited as to what we see and what we understand. Yet, as we walk through this world and see the arrogance within the world, we are constantly running into people who have an opinion on everything and who have an answer to every dilemma. Bawa used to call them the know-it-all fools. And the reason he called them that is none of us truly know it all, but there is a whole element of the population that believes that it does. And in science, the scientists come up with what they call theories, which are explanations of the way things are, which may or may not be correct, but we're taught these theories as if they were real. We're taught these theories as if they had actual substance. But in truth, our knowledge is very limited. We have, as man, never traveled to another planet in the solar system. We are limited in our capacity to understand the stars and the suns and what goes on beyond this planet. We are limited in our understanding of the universe. We are limited in so many ways. And holy men come and tell us that the only way that you're going to get in touch with what it is that you don't know is to let go of everything that you do know. So the secret to gaining knowledge is relieving yourself of everything that you think you know. And this has to do with your connection to your mind. As long as the mind is spewing information and making assumptions and giving opinions, your ability to know things is going to become limited or is limited. Now, two monks were sitting next to each other and they looked up and one of them said, "The flag at the front of the monastery is fluttering." And the other monk said, "No, the wind is fluttering." And the abbot, who was walking by, said to both of them, "No, your mind is fluttering." So, what's fluttering? What's actually happening? What is the connection between the world outside of us and our perception of the world outside of us? And what's the extent of the reality of our perception of the world outside of us? we have senses that give us input as to what is going on around us. We incorporate this and it travels through our mind. Our mind has all of these preconceived notions that it's learned as we were growing up and as we were going to school. So everything, once again, gets filtered through these preconceived notions. And then we begin to make assumptions. Now, we've all learned that in order to get along in the world, in order to be able to earn a living, in order to be able to do our jobs, in order to be able to get along, we have to make certain assumptions. Like, if I drive to work, I have to assume how I'm going to get there. And I have to know the pathway that I'm going to drive on in order to do that. So to say nothing is real and to say everything is an illusion is far from our own experience, because our own experience tells us that there are certain assumptions that we have to rely on in order to be able to get along in this world. But we also understand that this world is an illusion and this world disappears and our interaction with it will disappear. So our sheikh said to us, make believe that you believe in the world, but truly only believe in God. You see, our connection here is temporary. Our connection here is not a permanent installation. It's not like we're set up here and we're going to remain here. That's not how it works. And all of this that we see was created. And all of this that we comprehend and we visualize and we have connection with was created. And the elements of all that we see are the same as the elements with which we were created. So elementally, we are the same as everything we encounter outside of us. And one of the things that comes with age and comes with seeing things go is that many things disappear over time. There is a birth and there is a death. But when winter ends and spring begins, do you say winter died and spring was born? Or is it a continuum? Is it a continuum that goes from one step to the next? Is it a continuum that goes on and is part of a cycle that turns from one thing into the other? Are they in fact very similar? Are they tied to each other? To understand this kind of an attitude, to understand an attitude that knows death is and knows that birth is and doesn't make a big differentiation between the same, is wisdom and understanding things beyond the ordinary understanding. There was once a conqueror, a great soldier, who was rampaging village after village. And he came to this one rather large village. and there was no one there. And he asked his soldiers, "What happened here?" And they said, "It appears that everybody left because they heard you were coming, and they took everything that they had here. And because of that, there's nothing to take." And the general got really angry. And he said, "Scour this area, see if there's anybody anywhere." And they found a monastery, and they found one monk in the monastery. So they directed the general to the monk. He went into the monastery and stood before the monk, and the monk was meditating. And he didn't even look up. He just continued to do what he was doing. And the general screamed at him, "Don't you realize someone is in front of you who could kill you in the bat of an eye?" And the monk responded, "Don't you realize that there's someone in front of you who doesn't care if he's killed in the bat of an eye?" And the general realized the magnitude of the monk's understanding of things and his release from the difficulties and the usual trepidation and worry of the world, and he turned and left. In this world, we tend to become wrapped up in the everyday difficulties of life. There was an ox who lived on a green island, and every day he ate, and the grass was plentiful. But at night, when it was dark, he would begin to worry about where's his food going to come the next day? How's he going to make do the next day? What if everything disappears the next day? And because of this, he became weak overnight. Every night he would wake up and the island was full of grass again, and he would eat again, and he would be good during the day. But in the evening, he would go back to worrying again. Even though he'd been getting up every day for 30 years and his supply of food was always there. We are very similar to that. We don't realize that worrying is not a necessary part of existence, and it doesn't do us any good. It doesn't help us. And we also don't know through history, our own history, that Allah has provided for us every day for our entire life. Why is that going to change? Why would something else happen? So we need to begin to understand the nature of patience and the nature of the way things work. And we have to know that we have our own expectations, but things happen in God's time as they are supposed to happen. And if we can be rid of our own anxiety and replace it with patience, if we can be rid of our own trepidation and replace it with patience, if we can rid ourselves of all of the assumptions that we make about what's going to happen in the future and what we expect to happen in the future and what we need in order to be content in the future, we'll find that we can be content now. But as long as we are constantly worried about future contentment, how are we possibly going to meet present contentment? And present contentment is what we're looking for. But if our thought process is into the future, or if our thought process is into the past, if we are full of regret, or if we are full of trepidation about the future, we cannot find contentment in the moment. So we need to stop thinking about the future and thinking about the past. We have to be able to be in the moment. Now, we all have to understand this in the reality of our circumstances. If you're working and you have a plan over time, well, you have to follow out that plan, but you have to be able to do it without fear, without trepidation, do the best that you can, and then rely on the grace of God to have it happen the way it's supposed to happen, and take it as it comes and continue forward. What happens with us as people is we make assumptions about the way things should be, and then we react to those assumptions. If the assumptions that we make don't come out in the way that we make them, we have emotional reactions to outcomes dependent upon what our mind thought, dependent upon what our mind conceived of as the way things should be. We are not, unless grace comes to us in this lifetime, going to understand everything. Our understanding are going to be limited, but we have to have the patience for that understanding to come. Now, Allah has told us through the holy books and through holy men that we were created out of love, his love, and his compassion. We were created so that there would be a creation of his that could commune with him. So we are his secret, and he is the secret within us. The communion of that union is reality. When the secret within us merges within him, that is reality. That is the consummate finality to the truth of what our existence is. And until that occurs, we are limited in what we know and what we understand. So we have to have the patience to be able to go through all that we have to go through until we know what we know, until we know what we're supposed to know, until we come in contact with reality. But in the interim, what we can do is, as we are patient, we can also show compassion for the world and compassion for everything that we run into and everyone that we run into. You see, when we can give of ourselves to others and give of ourselves on behalf of others, we lose the fascination that our mind has with ourselves, and we stop thinking about ourselves. And when we stop thinking about ourselves, we become free from all of the torture that our mind predicts as to the present, as to the future, as to what's going to happen, as to what may happen, as to what could happen. All of a sudden, our focus changes. And if our focus changes towards something else, towards someone else, on behalf of someone else, we begin to lose that self-identity that we have about ourselves, where we are the center of the universe, where we are the most important thing that's going on. As we lose that, we begin to understand the unity in creation. We understand the unity of all mankind. We understand the sameness about us as opposed to the differences about us. And what's interesting is not only do people of different religions, of different races, of different languages find differences among themselves, people within their own small groups find differences among themselves. Let's take one of the most simple. Men in many countries don't treat women as people. And because of this, they have created a huge gap between themselves and half of humanity, as if that half of humanity was somehow other than them. The Buddha said, until women are equal to men in the eyes of humanity, his Dharma is not complete. This is a pretty basic understanding, and man hasn't been able to grasp that basic understanding. So is it any surprise that if man is able to separate himself in his own social circle from half of the people in it, automatically that people find differences of all kinds in every sector that's possible? Differences seem to be something that man looks for and relishes. We have to be able to give up these differences. As we give up these differences, as we lose the connection with the egocentric self, as we become free of our connection to ourselves being the center of everything, we become free in the sense that we are no longer tied to illusion, that we're no longer tied to the lies that our mind tells us, and we can escape into truth, and we will be able to see truth. By giving of yourself, by being compassionate towards others, Allah has treasures for you, gifts for you that will open your eyes to the truth. When you are able to encounter another and be compassionate towards them, that means that compassion runs through your being, and compassion comes from God. So God has given you one of his attributes that runs through your being, and to have within you one of God's qualities is to elevate you into another level of understanding, into an opening where wisdom can come into you. Now, wisdom is inherent with all of us, inside of all of us. And wisdom will rise to the level of our intention towards truth. So compassion is truth. If we intend compassion, then the wisdom requisite to compassion will enter us, and we will have the wisdom that compassion brings. And when compassion is brought into us, love is engendered in us, and love begins to rise, and the fire of love begins to burn within us, and the wisdom that comes with love arises within us, and then our eyes see this world in a different way. And all of a sudden, things that we never understood before now can be understood. Things that can't be understood when we are separate from each other become understood when we are integrated with each other, when our being is able to be integrated with the ones that we see, where we don't see the differences between each other. Jesus said, treat your neighbor as you would treat yourself. The Sufis say, try and become your neighbor, and then treat him as yourself. I may have mentioned to you there's an order of Sufis called Halvetis, who, after they do their prayers, sit together and stare into each other's eyes until they get to the point where they can't recognize which one is which. They lose their identity in each other. Can we walk through this world and lose our identity in each other? When we sat with our sheikh and we had conversation with him, it became evident that he merged with us to understand truly who we were and to truly convey unto us that which we needed to understand in the way that we could understand it. Can we merge with others? Can we give up our self-identity on behalf of others? When people see a wise man, people will become enamored by him, and some people will want to become like him. But most people don't have an idea of what it means to become a true wise man, a true holy man. The holy man has given up his self on behalf of others to where his identity doesn't exist any longer, where his identity is integrated with everyone around him, in front of him, on the side of him, in back of him, and everyone he encounters. He sees the entire world as that same being. He sees all men as that same being, and his purpose is to be compassionate and to help them, to bring the qualities that are God's into being so that he can transfer them to others. Now, if you are with a holy man and you are following a holy man, you have to think about what is the reason for being here and what is the objective for being here. Why are you hanging out there? And if the answer isn't to become like him and to lose yourself, then your mind is deluding you into reasoning that has nothing to do with reality. So we have to understand the path of reality, and we have to have the patience with ourselves as we move on this path. So as we become more and more evolved, we become less and less ourselves. We become more and more the qualities of our Creator. And we've all been told that our Creator is within everyone's heart. Everyone's heart. So as we become that way, we become more and more interested in all of humanity. We become more and more someone who gives in the way that God gives. And the return is to become more and more like our Creator. And the benefit of becoming more and more like the Creator is the treasure of the Creator's qualities, which are greater than any treasure on this earth. And then the King gives freely of himself to you. There was a king who was getting older and he had no heir. So he put out a notice that he wanted to adopt a son so that he would have an heir to the kingdom. And he put out a bulletin and had it spread throughout the land. And a peasant shepherd saw this and said, well, I'll go. And he read the qualifications. And it said, you have to believe in God and love your neighbor. And he said to himself, I believe in God and I love my neighbor. Let me see what happens. But the boy was dressed in rags, and he thought it would be inappropriate for him to go to see the king dressed in rags. So he took some other jobs so he could make a little bit of extra money so that he could buy himself a decent suit of clothes. And he did that. And he finally got the money together, had the clothes, and began to walk towards the palace. It was a long journey. Many days went by, and he came within close to the palace, and it was cold, it was winter, and he ran into a beggar who was in tatters and shredded clothes and was cold, and he felt compassion for him. And they spoke, and the young boy took his clothes and traded them with the beggar. So once again, he was in rags, and he thought to himself, well, should I continue on my journey? I'm inappropriate to see the king. And then he thought, well, I'm almost here, so I might as well go the rest of the way. And he went. And as he got to the palace and people saw him and they asked him why he was coming, he explained that he had also gotten this notice and was coming to see the king. And they laughed at him. But because the king said everyone who comes should be allowed to see the king, he was let in. And finally, he approached the king. And as he looked at the king, somehow he felt at home. Somehow he felt he recognized him. And the king, as soon as the king saw him approaching, stepped off his throne and walked towards him. And the boy recognized that the king was dressed in the clothes that he had given to the beggar. And the king walked up to him and put his arm around him and said, welcome home, my son. And he was the one who was chosen. Why? Because of his compassion and because God, the king, understood his compassion. So if we want to become the children of the king, we have to have that kind of compassion. We have to have that kind of love for our neighbor. We have to engender within us the intention to kindness, the intention to mercy, the intention to compassion. And as that raises up in us, we become more godlike. The great Sufi Hallaj went through the streets saying, Anal Haq, I am reality. This is the height of our integration with truth, to become reality, to become at one with what? To become at one with that which is without form, with that which is without description, at one with that which is beyond our present understanding. But we have to have the patience to believe that that understanding will become our understanding. And this is faith, and this is certitude, and this is determination. And without patience, we'll run away from this. But with patience, we can bear the time that it takes to find the truth. And the truth will be revealed to us, not necessarily as our mind conceives of it, but as Allah is ready to show us. So we need to have the fortitude to be able to do what we have to do in the world, yet believe in God and continue to move towards integrating into his qualities so that reality becomes who we are and reality becomes what we are in truth. And this is a process that can take years or can happen in a moment. But we have to have the patience and the faith that it will happen. So when we pray, we need to say, Allah, show us the truth. Allah, reveal to us that which brings us into reality. Do this on behalf of the prophets who came to tell us about this reality, on behalf of the Ketubs who came to tell us about this reality, on behalf of all of the ones who you've sent to tell us about this reality. Make that reality our reality. Make us not be attached to this illusory world. Make us be able to let go of all of the glitters and fascinations that we've been brought to believe in, that we know is not true, and make us understand the truth which these eyes can't see and which these ears can't hear, but which the inner eyes can see and which the inner eyes can hear and which the inner heart knows is truth. Bring that truth into our being. Make us that truth. Do this for each and every one of us, Allah. Do this for each and every one of us. Ameen, ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.